Hello, everybody, and welcome. Is this so nice that my chair doesn't do that crazy, obnoxious squeaking anymore? Oh God, I had to I was watching the pre-recorded session zeros of Regicide, and I was like, how did people suffer through the squeaking of my chair? It was awful. So thank you everybody for dealing with that, because including you two, because it was terrible, but it's gone now. Squeaky gone.
What you're saying is if we get squeaky chairs, you'll buy us new chairs.
Nope, not what I said at all. And you. So they sorry, let me unmute you. So they as we come back from break, why don't we find ourselves over in the city of Loshev? Loshev until this point has never been approached by the party. As a matter of fact, they don't know at all what it is like. So Neil, I do have to ask, when you're looking at the map of Idir, do you approach Loshev, which you've never actually been to before, so you don't know the paths, but you do have, of course, a map that tells you the direction to get there. Do you approach from a directly east course, like you just traveled a little bit south and then just went straight west and approach directly from that direction? How is it that you approach Loshev?
Um, there's no reason to adjust course. The only reason would be is this is a river. It probably isn't bridged because of what we know about Idir. So we would follow along a trail should we find one alongside the river, / speak to the local people in the area and ask where a ford is.
Sure. So then you can actually roll a survival or a diplomacy check to get that answer for yourself. Okay. So the people in the area as you're coming to approach, and so it's kind of like we were saying, heading that southwest direction. As the people in the area that you come across, you notice that after you break through the tree side, there are just individual persons that live on the frontier by themselves, kind of spotted here and there. You know what I mean? There's maybe there'll be three homes kind of near each other that all have very small farms. They all work on kind of together, and maybe it was all one family. Maybe it's three different families that get along. On this chunk over here, and then many miles later, you might find an individual frontier home by itself, and you can kind of discuss those people with those people. And what they end up telling you is that there is in fact a crossing of the river from an old bridge that existed many years ago. However, it is a considerable number of miles south of Loshev, and that you may use that bridge to get across. While the bridge itself is no longer completely together in its original form, which is comprised of stone, it is still bridged with a kind of like a rope bridge in the middle of it, where people kind of have tied a walking path between the two, and you can go across that way. That is considerably to the south. They do also say that you can cross the river, as you were saying, kind of a bit of a ford where it's a bit more shallow, wider, so on and so forth. You can cross it much closer to Loshev, actually a little bit to the north of it. However, if there's a heavy rainfall recently, then that can cause there to be a much stronger and to higher currents than you would expect. Or with it going into winter, if it's a particularly cold day, it could be dangerous.
What's the weather been like recently, temperature-wise, rain-wise?
It is so as a reminder for where it is that you are in the country, you are a bit further to the south than even the center of all of Eroth. And Eroth is in the southern hemisphere of the planet, so it is a bit colder here. It does get colder faster here. So you will occasionally still have days that are sitting around, I'm going to speak this in imperial terms, Fahrenheit. You will still have days that are sitting in the mid-60s, midday. But for the most part, it's 65 degrees midday. But nighttime gets very cold.
Oh,
so
15, okay. Let's take the bridge route south.
Okay. So you can, of course, take that path south. One of the things that will be brought to your attention by one of the guards traveling with you, as Norway mentioned in chat, rope bridges and horses don't necessarily mesh well unless it's handled well. So just kind of a thing to keep in mind. You still go that path?
Ah. Well, who builds a rope bridge across an actual bridge? That doesn't.
Because the bridge collapsed many years ago. The center of the
Right, yeah,
bridge
but
fell many
just
years ago.
stick a 2x4 over it. Come on. Hmm. That's a very good point. And horses actually have good strength, and so can ford easily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's ford.
Okay, so you're gonna instead head slightly, so heading back to the north a little bit, and then kind of crossing almost in that. I suppose you can't see the hexes at the moment. It's the hex northeast of Le Chevre, if you're looking at the map that I put inside the spoilers chat earlier. So, anyways, the going over to that area and finding the area that you can ford, you do go to cross the river. I'm going to need from you, and this is going to be a uniform check. Roll for me a handle animal check. Now, you could, of course, roll this yourself, or you can say, I'd rather put it in the hands of an NPC. But either way, it needs to be rolled.
A handle animal.
Mm-hmm.
Can I not roll a ride check instead?
Actually, my apologies. You most certainly can roll a ride check instead.
Yeah.
Oh! Oh! Excuse me, hiccups. Oh, it just hit me. Hopefully those go away fast. It just rolled right off that 20 onto that 2. That sucks. Do you want to modify that at all?
No.
Cool. I'm just gonna... And I'm going to subtract 3 from your roll using my first bit of Daddy's dice. Thank you, Steve, for giving me some dice. And bringing
it's not enough. It's a 10 DC. It's not enough.
And so that brings you down to a 6 on your total result of the ride check. So as you guys are going to cross the ford and going across the area, the issue is that the water is very cold. And no, horses are strong fortitude creatures, so on and so forth. But it just happened to be a particularly cold night the night beforehand. And so as the horses are crossing, they're walking across a bit gingerly. Which is an issue because their ginger step allowed a couple of the horses to end up slipping on the slippery rocks beneath the current and end up spraining the ankles of one of the horses. Another one gets temporarily swept away, and it takes a considerable amount of effort from all the people together to pull the horse back ashore. And now it is like soaking wet and is dealing with hypothermia and whatnot on the other side. All in all, your character, you can choose to either deal with the horses as they are and continue pushing forward to get to Le Chevre and let things lie, or spend a day trying to fix the situation.
So one of the horses sprained their ankles, and the other one is cold.
One is hypothermia, another one is a sprained ankle, another one has kind of like a pulled muscle in one of its hind legs.
That's fine. We can sort that easily. So the one that is cold, you just get it to gallop. You just gallop a lot, and it will warm up, because that's how horses do. The other ones you don't want to gallop, so that's fine. They can go ahead and scout, while the other ones are dealt with at a slow walk.
So you want to handle the situation versus just pressing on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because just pressing on is dumb. You wouldn't just press on.
Okay. Then why don't you roll me a handle animal check, or survival check, either one of those.
I'm not good at either.
That's okay. You make your pick. Awesome. So you end up handling the situation well enough. The horse does get warmed up and properly treated. The other ones get the proper rest they need, proper wrappings on one of the legs. The other one is just no weights to put on them. The weight is distributed to the others. And eventually the problem solves itself. You're able to press on to Le Chevre. When you get to the city of Le Chevre, one of the important things to note, it's not actually technically a city, but it is definitely a large town. As a matter of fact, with the exception of Hadgwen, this is the largest town you've seen here so far. When you come approaching Le Chevre from the northeastern corner, you notice that it doesn't really have any walls. It doesn't have any defenses or anything like that there, but there are, in fact, patrolling guards in the area. As you come approaching the town, there's a group of you. It's not 2 or 3 people. There's a group of 6 of you on horseback, armed with weapons, some of you wearing armor, so on and so forth, approaching. The guards approach you. But when they approach, because of like how you're adorned and whatnot, they keep a distance. So from a good, say 50 meters back, they're calling over to you. This is a scouting or a patrolling party of 3 guards, themselves also on horses, but smaller, lighter horses. Not like they don't even necessarily seem like war trained mounts. They're calling out to you to the side and like, "Whoa there! There's a good number of you traveling in. What's your purpose of visiting Loshev?"
Rayron would dismount and lead his horse and shout over.
Do you have the others accompany you, or do you like wait for them to stay back?
No, they can accompany, but they dismount as well.
Everybody dismounts and leads. Gotcha. Go ahead.
Yeah, a hell of a lot less scared of 6 people on foot than 6 people on horseback.
Yep.
We've just forded the river. We've come from Kurzfall. Perhaps you've heard of it?
There's a little discussion amongst each other. One of them says, rumors recently. What brings you here?
We've come to meet our new neighbors.
Once again, there's kind of like, as you're approaching, they don't stop you or say for you to stop or anything, and I imagine you're approaching at a slower pace, not like moving up there quickly. They're kind of discussing amongst themselves for a couple of moments, and then they will ride forward just to make the walk a little bit easier for you, and that way you're not shouting anymore. But definitely from his high perch, he's going to continue the conversation, still a good like 20 feet away, unless you go to even walk even closer. And he says, "So you happen to be a diplomat from this Kurzfell?"
My name is Rayron. I'm the chosen of the Quill, one of the leaders of the nation.
Nation of Kurzfell?
The nation isn't so much Kurzfall as the city. You might hear about the nation in the coming years. We intend for it to be called Valoran. It's probably worth remembering, in fact.
It's funny you say that, and like a couple of the subjects behind you had never heard that phrase before, and they're kind of like, "Oh, yeah, okay." One of them's like, "Did you?" And that kind of like happens behind you, and then he says, "So the chosen of the Quill, Rayron, from the city of Kurzfall and the nation of Valoran."
Yes, that is a succinct and accurate summary.
And you just come here to meet the neighbors?
Among a few other more diplomatic purposes, yes.
Very well then. If you were coming here on diplomatic purposes from another nation, I would not insult you by stripping your guard of their weapons. However, I will inform you that if you're going to the meeting hall, and we do have a meeting hall in our lovely town, there are not any weapons allowed inside the meeting hall. So if you yourself are going in, you will personally be stripped, and I would suggest that you leave your guards outside of it if they wish to keep themselves armed.
That sounds fine to me, with one exception. Unfortunately, it's rather my badge of office, and it wouldn't do quite so well for me to be separated with my quill here. And he taps the sword at his hip. It's a religious thing, you understand.
He thinks for a few moments. Roll me a diplomacy check. You can see he's kind of like thinking it over. He's not entirely sure, and he says, "Very well, I understand. Chosen of the Quill," and he kind of like leaves that as a question.
Yes.
You don't answer the question?
He did. He said yes.
He continuing on, he's like, "What faith is that?"
Lady Winifred Orenda.
He nods.
Perhaps you've heard of her.
Yep, he nods, knowing the goddess. Then he will. What is that? Oh, jeez. So he nods, knowing the goddess, and then says, "Very well, then. your men may mount your steeds as well as you, of course, and I will escort you in.
Thank you kindly.
When they escort you into the town, again, it is a large town, and so because of that, the population is rather large. You can actually see, once again, same as beforehand, as you approach, even over by the river, there are definitely, like, a couple of piers set up on the river that people have established a spot for them to be, like, casting lines and, for catching certain types of fish. Over a little bit further down the stream, there's, netting area set up where they're, doing catching over there. You can actually see as you're approaching, there's little bits of shops and everything, even on the outskirts of town, and certainly more when you go into it. You can see that this place happens to have a bustling business. But one of the other things that really catches your eye is that one of the pier that's to the most northern part of Le Chèvre, because that's where you're approaching from, is the north, actually is a dock. And the dock can hold a few boats, but definitely there's 2 keel boats that are currently set up there. One of the keel boats has a flag waving from it that you might know what the banner is. Roll for me a knowledge local. Or knowledge history. So just so you guys know the way knowledge local works, knowledge local is as you imagine. It's literally the local, in which case local is based off of your background. So for instance, U1, local would be over in the northern parts of the Barren Lands, southern parts of Kajinksi, and in Idir. For Neil, it's going to be over in Amalta and Idir, etc. And anything that's outside of that rung of what you understand takes increases the DC, and every step outside the rung increases the DC by more. Okay. So, anyways, knowledge local 21, you definitely succeed. You can tell that is actually a ship sailing of Lvov, which is actually, if you go up the river, is the first town, the first major location that you're going to come across in Paradel, specifically in the region of Vala. So it is a Perrin, likely trading vessel that is here. And now you can kind of understand where it is that they get their commerce from. When they bring you into the city, on the outskirts of the city, there is a stable. They tell you that you're welcome to stable the horses there. Your men are welcome to stable their horses there. He actually doesn't tell you that you have to, kind of invites for you to stay on your horse, and continues leading you through the town over to where the meeting area is. The meeting area is probably where the center of town was many years ago, but is now kind of off-centered. It's a large old building that has clearly been added on to several times, but now when you when you go to it, you go walking up the, there's actually like a few steps that bring you up to now where the main door of it is. There are a few guards that stand outside of it, like actual, stationed guards, which is kind of unusual for a lot of places in Idir. The old building itself is mostly made out of wood, but like I said, because of the different expansions, there's parts that are made out of brick or stone as well. I should say stone, not brick, of stone as well. The guards that are stationed there, they have their pikes or whatever. As you go to enter, he does, the person that comes with you, you leave your horses outside, he walks up with you and says, you do, of course, have to leave your weapons outside. You're welcome to leave everything with your men, with the exception of your quill. And he says that with a bit of a quip to it, but doesn't push the issue.
Raymond would comply.
Okay, so you hand over everything else, give it to them.
Oh, other than his blade boot, because he can't take his shoes off.
Yeah, but also it's concealed. So,
yeah.
So you hand over the stuff, and when the doors open up, it opens up, and you can see it actually does open into a great hall. It immediately opens into a very, very large hall area. And this is much like you'd imagine, almost like medieval courthouses and whatnot were held, and even some modern courthouses, where at the far ends, there's like a table set up where there's a few chairs set in front of it, and behind that table, there's a bit of a rise that was built of wood, where there's a table a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right, so it's not directly behind the people in front, but kind of behind them, where there's another 5 people could sit, so the total of 15 seats could be sat inside here. And there are many almost like pews that set up across this great hall over towards the area. The pews aren't bolted or logged down, and you can tell immediately by the scratches on the floor that there are many occasions where the pews are probably moved off to the side or even out of the room entirely for whatever
festivals,
events.
dances, everything. Yeah.
The place has that old smell of wood that slightly rotted, just a little bit, just enough must inside there, but it also has that old smell of just old people and sweat, because when you come walking in, you could actually see that of the 15 seats, currently 7 of them are sat, 3 in the front table, 2 in each of the back tables, and not symmetrical, but kind of like put about. And there are a number of people that are sitting inside the pews, kind of waiting in a queue to be called up to have their grievances or whatever they are called before the council. And so as you walk into the chamber and kind of like take in the sight, you know, maybe your character goes to like take a step forward or whatever, he would actually, you know, be so daring as to place a hand onto your shoulder and say...
Raren wouldn't, because he's in another, we'll say nation for now, another culture's territory, and will abide by their laws for this instance particularly well, because he wants them to think of him favorably.
Okay, so so he does place a hand like on your shoulder, which is maybe a little too forward, but he seems kind of comfortable with that kind of approach to handling the situation. So he places a hand on your shoulder and says, "If you give a moment for this situation to resolve itself, I'll have you renounced."
Thank you. Raren would take a seat.
Okay. And that's like literally if you. That's when you go to take the seat is when he'll put the hand on your shoulder to be like to wait back here, like over by the door. And so he takes a couple steps forward and kind of like off to the side, almost like taking a post, like he was himself a guard on like the inner wall, right around like the opening area, the opening kind of like archway or whatever that you're coming through. And several more minutes pass. Do you care of what's going on, or the conversation inside, or commerce squabble?
Definitely.
Roll me a perception check.
Because it could be useful. Could.
God damn it, Neil's back! Oh, Jesus. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, he is back. So, the grievance that's currently going on is that there is a shopkeep that is, my apologies, there's a shopkeep, there's one particular shopkeep who's making a grievance of the taxes that are being levied over in the region where he is, and how those taxes, because of like, more or less it's just like, you can understand what you're kind of extrapolating from the conversation, is that there's different types of taxes for different types of businesses or location or whatever in the city. The finite details obviously are amiss to you. But the way that they're being levied specifically on his business are negatively impacting his ability to keep his head above water, saying that it's like really causing his business to you know, kind of fall asunder. You can see that the people in here, the way that they're handling it, it's very... you can imagine there was a law at some point in time that was passed. This law decided these are the taxes and the way they're going to be handled. If you have a problem with that, perhaps you should come back and make the grievance and try to start a vote to change the laws. But more or less, every argument they make, they're kind of like, yes, 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 yes. And you've stated that already, Mr. You know, Kurtweil. Uh-huh, mm-hmm. And are you done wasting the time of, you know, time is precious here. And literally very dismissive of this person's concerns, of the old people sitting up on the chairs. And they end up not having any resolution that they're happy with and kind of leaving very ticked off. And you can see like the angry look in their face as they walk by. It's important to note that of the people that are sitting inside there, there's about 24 people sitting inside here. Half of them definitely human. The other half are a mix of mostly hobgoblin, a couple Perrin, etc., etc. As a reminder, and I'll say this many times in several streams, Perrin, when they're in their youth, look almost identical to humans. Usually a Perrin can tell the difference. As they get older, their features become elongated ears, higher cheekbones, kind of sunken in face. They look more of that otherworldly nature, almost that more elven look. That happens many years, like many decades into their life. Neil, back to you. As that finishes up, they kind of like, you know, meeting adjourned for that particular thing. They go to start getting ready to call the next person, kind of like rifling through the parchment in front of them, when this is the guard that had come forward, says, excuse me, my apologies. He says, excuse the interruption, counselors of the meeting hall. Counselors to Leshev, within the meeting hall, and this meeting adjourns. I come with you bringing a diplomat from a nearby region, from a nearby kingdom, a newly founded kingdom of Valoran, specifically from the city of Kurzfall. It is a man by the name of Rayrin, goes by the title Chosen of the Quill. Of course, in great honor to her lady, Orenda Winifred. And then he kind of like steps to the side and gestures for you to go forward. You can tell by the way that he delivers this, it's not just the DM, though it was partially that. It's also, this is kind of out of practice for him. Yeah, he's not a herald by any stretch. But he does the best he could, kind of flubbing through it. And then he, gestures towards you. It's kind of an obnoxiously wide sweeping gesture. But either way, you appreciate the effort he put in.
Oh.
And you can start going forward.
Rain would stand, step forward, bow slightly to the councillors. Councillors of Loshev, and he turned to the amassed crowd. People of Loshev, thank you for lending me your ear and your time for a few moments today. As your most competent guard here has said, I've traveled from Kurzweil, from the nation of Valorin, to speak to you, our neighboring town, and neighboring friends on this day. We had a wonderful journey in our lovely Idir's cold weather, hastened us across the river, and now I'm here to speak with the councillors and the people with regards to the future of Idir. First off, may I say, it has been a pleasure to be allowed into your lovely city, and a pleasure to see Idir thriving with commerce and leadership. He says commerce to the people, and looks to councillors when he says leadership.
Awesome.
However, the freedom that you hold now may one day be imperiled. Across Idir, down the river, lies Hald Gwen. It was once the gem of Idir, the capital. However, now it finds itself to be the festering host of a parasitic infection that has taken the form of thievery and robbery. Yes, they may produce gold, silver. However, it is gold and silver stained in blood. Not like the true commerce that us Northmen practice up here. The Southerners down there have fallen to the decadent ways of crime. Which is why I come now to warn you of their expansionist agenda. And to request, if I may be so bold, that we strengthen our friendship and ties further. He turned to the councillors.
Yep. So, kind of listening to that, they at first they were like mildly interested, but it's the directed way of speech. You know what I mean? The point that's brought across, everything that's kind of like put before them, and the package that was delivered, that you've certainly gotten all of their attention. Whereas there's one counselor that was you pretty sure sleeping during the last person's grievances being put forward, is definitely listening in fully. Every one of them straight backed, or at least as much as their old crippled bodies allow them to be. As you finish your speech and turn to them for guidance, one of them says to you, please, the honor is that of the councils to have you as a guest in our home. The formation of Kurzweil has been known for a few months' time. We've heard word of a budding nation over there. We didn't know that they had such brilliant representatives and leaders. My apologies. And it's a pleasure to meet you. Chosen of the Quill, is that's what I heard the title is?
Yes, Councillor. However, you may call me Rayrin.
Rayrin, then it is, perhaps. Lord Rayrin, then I'm certainly, I can speak on behalf of the council that sits here. We would like to hear more of what it is that you would like to discuss and union of further workings together between our nation and yours, for the sake of commerce, as you've so eloquently put, because more gold in the pockets of the people makes for a happier nation overall, he says, kind of like looking semi-toothlessly smile over to the grievanced people inside the area, also trying to like win them over, but there's a bit of murmuring, but they're not really convinced by him. He says, but also of this growing threat you say is happening to the south. Now, the matter of matter that you wish to speak of, it is something that is not appropriate for half council. It is something that should be set before a full council and a full meeting hall, unless there are private matters that shouldn't be discussed separated from the public eye. And I think moving forward, that is how we should continue this discussion. Moreover, I think it's important that perhaps we look into this Hardgwen issue. I wish not to be rude, but of course we must be thorough with these kind of conversations. Would you be willing to stay for perhaps a week's time as a guest in our home, and perhaps we can call for a full council's meeting with you in a week hence?
Thank you, Counselor. I would, of course, understand that you want our friendship to be based upon truth and fact, which I would agree with most heartily. As such, I would agree to your terms. However, I believe it would be important for us to become more acquainted today. Perhaps I would be so bold as to impose upon you a tour of your fine town. And of course, for those who are being interrupted by this, I would proffer a measly sum just to allay the time that has been wasted. Perhaps a gold piece for everyone here who requests grievance?
There is not murmuring, but conversation happening amongst the room. As I said beforehand, when you first walked in, there were about 24 people inside there. Sans the 7 counselors and the one grievanced person before, that leaves you with only 16 people left. So that's only 16 gold, which is nothing from your pockets, but certainly a lot to those 16 individuals. You know what I mean? So when you say that, there's actually almost like from 2 or 3 of the counselors, like almost like toothless gumming, like thrown back by your offer. And so the counselor looks to the other counselors and says, a moment, looking back to you. He turns to like the one that's sitting immediately adjacent to him, and the other one's like a couple seats over, and they have, we're going to say, a whispered conversation. They are still a distance from you, so you're welcome to try to listen in if you would like. I imagine if you choose to do so, you're going to try to do so discreetly, so you're going to take a penalty for the discretion, because you're not going to be like
I'll do a discreet listen, because, yeah, why not? No, I think probably not.
So, unfortunately, despite the fact that they're old,
they're all too excited about the gold.
What did you say? Speak up, Clarence. You still aren't really able to make out any of the conversation that they have. It takes like 4 or 5 minutes for them to all finally get the word between the 7 of them, spaced out as they are, because none of them get up to Anyways, so they eventually get the word across to all of them, and he looks back to you and says, then with majority rule, by way of yeas and nays, do the people agree to this? To these terms set forward by Lord Rayrin here, and he kind of like taps, with his feeble, weak fingers onto the desk. No mallet or gavel or anything like that. And you're pretty sure, unanimous yeas amongst the people that are there. And he says, "Very well then. This meeting's the meeting at the meeting hall. We are adjourned for the day, and you may all, of course, settle out your differences with Lord Rayrin here. And Lord, we would like to speak to you again. If you don't mind giving us some time to appropriately adjourn this meeting."
Of course, you must be weary from a hard day's work. He would turn and proffer the 1 gold piece per individual.
And so it's literally like is it one of those, they walk past you like a priest handing out wafers? so peace be upon you and also upon you. So anyways, and they go and like some of them you can tell they've probably never held a gold piece in their life. Others, it's just a drop in the bucket, but certainly worth the time that's being wasted of theirs. You know what I mean? So they take the gold, at varying degrees of gratitude, and they leave the meeting hall. They take like another 40 minutes or so discussing amongst themselves. At this point in time, the guard will actually kind of come his way over to you and ask you to step back to behind even the last pew while they kind of finish things out. And he'll have a quick word with you of like, that was incredibly generous of you. Nothing that needs to like really play out, but small talk. More, you could tell it's more to kind of like, one, he's impressed, but two, to keep you distracted while they're kind of doing their own thing for a bit. After their 45 minutes or so, finally the counselors get up and lead themselves out of a chamber through the back door, through the back room, aside from a different one than the one that was speaking to you beforehand. He's the youngest amongst them. He is also a human, but when I say youngest amongst them, he's still probably in his like mid to late 40s, or let's say a youthful early 50s. So he makes his way across the meeting hall to meet with you and says, Lord Rayron, extends his hand to meet yours.
You check it.
Counselor Fox, Counselor Foxwood.
Councillor Foxwood. A pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Please, Fox. Likewise, that was a gesture that you made there. I certainly think you've left an impression that'll send a talk through the town.
Yes, and hopefully made your day a little bit easier.
Well, a problem not resolved today is one to handle tomorrow.
True, however, a problem paid in gold is a problem lessened.
He, nods, appreciative of the sentiment to that one, and then says, I believe you wanted a tour of the town.
Yes, it's been a while since I've seen somewhere quite so pleasant in Idir. It would be nice to see the area.
Okay. Now, we don't need to go through a whole-blown conversation with this person. What I want from you is to have your character properly represent himself in a diplomacy check with this guy. Now, Neil, because of the display that you did beforehand, how it was you handled the situation, I'm actually going to give you a circumstantial +4 to this check. So you get a +4 in your diplomacy check. Feel free to roll.
Cool. +4. So I roll that fat one. Didn't roll that fat one.
Did you apply the 4 in there already, or?
Yeah, I did, but I'm gonna pull with luck it as well.
Go right ahead, sir.
Because I feel like getting a 30 on this would be really useful. I didn't. Alas. Alas.
So, at the end of the time that you guys spend together, it is. And by the way, I imagine how many of your guard accompany you?
2.
Okay, and he will also have just one guard, the one that originally led you into the town. It wasn't what his job was supposed to be today, but it seems it's kind of like one of those things where, of course, he goes to call over a guard, and then because almost like you're like, you gesture towards this guy, or maybe he steps forward because you guys are amicable enough. He ends up coming along too. It ends up becoming a rather enjoyable experience where your guards have been discussing with him some details. It turns out that one of your guards, the one that had come along, actually originally came from this city, and so kind of like moved the other way, so didn't know this guy, but they can kind of like talk local stuff, the other one kind of chiming in. You and him get along fabulously. He ends up not only does he kind of like bring you on a tour through again, it's a large town, through the nice areas of the town, over in the commerce areas. You can explicitly tell that he's kind of avoiding the area that has kind of like the slummy nature going on, but you're not stupid. You pick it up. You realize he's avoiding that particular region of the town. He ends up bringing you out to dinner and actually flipping the bill for the dinner at a nice restaurant. The night ends up going on even more, kind of like walking around and doing more talking about in the night side of town. And it's literally just hours just fly by because you guys are legitimately having a good time. And he ends up ending kind of like the evening with, I do have to say, it has been an absolute delight spending this day with you. I've already, he's like, I will gladly speak to the missus. If you're going to be staying in town, especially for a week's time, we would love to have you as a guest to in our home. Of course, I understand protocol might be that of your nation. If you wish to have one or two of your guards stay in my home as well, they're more than welcome to. The others, would have to be put up inside a local inn or the like, but it would be an absolute pleasure of mine.
Fox, it would be an honor to stay with a friend.
And so that's kind of like where it is you end up finding yourself to the like where it is that you're going to end up staying. Now here's a big question: do you stay for the full week?
Midway through the week, he would check with Fox, like on how the investigation's going and whatnot, and subtly suggest that his time is valuable. And there are matters of the nation that, unfortunately, as much fun as he is having in Loshev, he will have to go and attend to, and that leaving them longer, as Fox well understands, a problem left or ignored is a problem for another day.
Okay. So it's one of those things where, funny enough you say that. He says that the council has to call itself together, so on and so forth. You were explicitly trying to push forward the date here because obviously you know the timer of vacancy inside of the throne. Why don't you make another diplomacy check? But this guy is, just so you know, on the scale of like, he is friendly. Sorry, no, he's helpful. He indifferent when you walked into the room, became friendly, became helpful.
Cool.
Do you care to add to that, or are you happy with your 23?
I think 23 is fine if he's helpful.
Okay, perfect. So he does the best he can to push it forward, and he's able to squeeze out 2 days for you. So instead of waiting a full 7 days time, he's able to squeeze it in for a meeting and whatnot. And so you're going to be handling that. But we're going to throw it back over to Jake, who had spent the night in the tavern, which is hilarious. But your crew, even the what's her name, Hansa, because of how intoxicated she got, everybody spent the night in the tavern that night. The next morning you wake up and you had your own agenda, perhaps to meet with the mayor, so on and so forth. What is it that you do when you kind of get up and finally out and about the next day?
The next day he just spend a bit of time, kind of probably recovering from the night before, just doing probably some small talk with Hunter and a few of the men, and then he would set out to find the mayor.
Okay, so you need to go and speak with her. So when you go speak to her, when you go to find her, it's very easy. Rid is a boring town, so it's kind of like, if this person doesn't answer the question, you just ask the one next to them. They're a little bit less of a zombie, and so they'll give you the answer. And so you were able to find her. She's also the second largest farm in the area, so you can always find it easily that way. You go to approach her. She is literally, as you're approaching, outside tending to one of the horses that have a plow attached to the back of it, which is funny because it's December, but she's looking to till soil after the first frost has already passed.
Yep, so I would approach her on horseback as well.
Okay. Mind you, the first frost, by the way, can happen... Sorry, many frosts was the first frost to pass, because the first frost tends to happen in November as opposed to December. My apologies. Which is probably the exact opposite of the way your brain works down in Australia, Jake. Your first
frost.
I
was like, that's summer. That's summer here.
Yeah. It's so like foreign to me that, yeah. But anyway, so you're probably what, June-ish or May-ish is first frost.
Yeah, June, I think.
June, yeah, probably early June. So, anyways, moving on. So you would go see her, and she's already had frost several times. I apologize at this point. She has a plow set up, and she's literally tending to one of the horses. You see, there are other people about, kind of like tending to this part of the land, that part of the land, but not like farming specifically, but like doing repairs on this barn over there and repairing the house over there, kind of getting things ready for the winter. So as you go to approach her, who accompanies you for this?
All of my guards.
All of them? The whole team comes walking up?
Yeah.
So as you approach from a good distance back, you notice that she's there, and she eventually looks up and sees you coming from a good ways back, and literally like one of those starts backing away from the horse and like leading it. Like you imagine you interrupted what it was she was working on, and leads it over towards the house, occasionally calling out a name here and there, and people look up, look over in your direction, and more or less everybody kinds of inconspicuously gathers themselves over by the actual
with
house.
implements.
Yeah.
There's like a pitchfork appears in someone's hand.
And they gather themselves over by the actual farmhouse. And when you finally do approach to where they are, they're over by like the house on the porch. A couple people have even come out from inside of the house. There's like a good like 10, 11 people standing there on the porch, as Neil was saying. Some of them with implements, others with literally like a sword strapped to their side, looking like they've recently, because the way their belt is kind of loose, recently fastened it to themselves. And you finish your approach, and maybe when you're still a bit back, she calls out like, welcome to my home. May I ask who the pleasure is?
Yeah, as she's saying that though, can I roll a sense motive so I can see how on edge they are?
Yep.
Okay.
I can tell you that they on edge.
You think you could smell the shit from wafting in this direction as six
that's
armed
not-
and armored people, led by like, the front of them being a very large and imposing figure, is coming her direction.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I wrote down, is her name Tally?
Correct.
Okay. I'd say,
Tally, or however you want to spell it.
yeah. I'd say, hello, Tally, is it?
She clears her throat, takes a moment, probably like swallowing down the tightness in her throat, and says, "It is."
I would look to one of my men who would probably grab my horse by the reins, and I would dismount.
As you dismount, your herald will then like like
Excellent.
Tally, Mayor of Rid, I put before you here his honorable, his amazing, chosen of the blade, one of Kurzfall, of the kingdom of Valoran. Recently having heard that the name from you, he has come here to meet with you.
When one hears that, he gets a big smile on his face, and he turns back to the herald, and he's like, I quite like that. Good job. And then he just like faces forward again.
He's like, I'm surprised. Well done.
And so you turn forward, and she's like, and you can see like as he said it, she was like taken aback. It's one of those things like you imagine at first the words just kind of like fell out of her head because she's like so taken aback by the situation. Then all of a sudden there's a trumpet and somebody yelling, threw her off, and then she kind of like pieces it back together, and like you're like turning back towards her, and you can see it's finally clicking. She's like, Kurzfall, to the west.
Yes, to the west.
Pleasure. How can I help you? Chosen of the blade.
Correct. Tally, would you mind if we had I'd like to request a meeting with you.
She looks
I
about.
will, of course, leave my retinue here. I understand you are the mayor of Reed. I have some things to discuss with you, if that is okay.
She looks to the people like around her. You imagine these are family and farmhands. You know what I mean? Like certainly nobody of any official capacity. Looks to them like for some sort of guidance, and they are like either dumbfounded looking themselves or kind of like nodding amongst each other like, yeah, go get it, you know? And so she eventually kind of turns back towards like 3 seconds later and says, very well then, a meeting. Please come in, she says, and gesturing towards the door.
Thank you. And then I would just head inside.
So she like, walks between them and opens the door and gestures for you to walk in. And as you walk inside, you can see that her home is actually very well kept. It's very cozy, very warm, etc., etc. It's just it's a simple farm home, a family that probably has some money, but certainly not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. You individually are probably more wealthy than she is, right? Than her family is. So she welcomes you into her home. If I remember correctly, your character is very tall.
Yeah, he's 6'3" or something.
So because of your height, it's one of those things where because it's a farmhouse, there's exposed beams overhead. It's like as you walk by, you certainly could want to be able to wear a helmet, otherwise you'd be like tinging off of the beams as you go. But as you walk, if it's like it happens to be a particularly low beam, it brushes the hair at the top of your head as you go past it. But you don't necessarily have to duck or crouch or anything. You're safe to walk through. She leads you into the living room, where there are a couple of like wooden carved chairs that are sitting there over by the hearth. The hearth is burning low, so she comes into the room with you and says, "Please, make yourself comfortable." And she immediately goes over to the hearth and throws 2 logs in the fire, places them gingerly and whatnot of well-practiced hands, stokes it a bit to make sure that the real heat is rising, and then goes over. Did you take a seat?
Yeah.
She sits as well, and says, "Oh, where are my manners? I imagine you traveled for a few days' time. Would you like maybe some bread? I do have fresh churned butter, or perhaps a glass of some whiskey."
Whiskey sounds great. Thank you.
She says, "Of course," and she gets up and goes over and it's like in a clay jug and pops it out, and she's got like wooden cups and pours them into the wooden cups, and she comes over and she places the bottle on almost like a what do they call it, like a coffee table sort of situation, or more like an end table, really, because how small it is, in the room, and hands you like your cup and says, "My uncle makes it. It gets the job done." And she says, like holding a glass, like a salut sort of a thing, and she takes a sip. When you take the sip, it's not the worst that you've had, but it's certainly not the best. And it certainly.
How is it compared to the inn that we've been drinking at?
The inn's purchased from people that actually know what they're doing. Yeah. So like that is actually better. The inn is definitely better than what you're drinking here.
Okay.
So.
At least you can't taste the copper, so you don't know whether you'll go blind and then die.
So you my apologies. Have a drink. I imagine it takes a moment for you to settle your face, and then you kind of like mentally prepare yourself to not make one with further sips. And then you can kind of progress. She goes, she kind of like opens up and says, Chosen of the Blade 1. What title do I call you?
Firstly, Tully, thank you for your hospitality. It is wonderful to have such a reception. You may refer to me as one. The Chosen of the Blade is my title of office. I am one of the 3 that rule Curseful in our nation of Valoran. I come to you today because it has come to our attention that the city of Hagwen are rapidly expanding. And I thought that it may be beneficial for us to chat, being neighbors and all. We are not far from Reed. So that is what brings me here. Have you had any contact with anyone, maybe messengers sent from Hagwen?
Messengers from Hagwen. I don't believe so. No messengers from Hagwen.
Can I sense motive on it?
Sure, go ahead.
Hard pass.
Are you happy with your result?
Yeah, that'll do.
Okay. So, she believes she's telling the truth. She doesn't give any inkling that she might be lying.
Yeah. So she says no. I say, um, we we've been to read a few times, and well, I quite like the inn here. And one of my subjects is awaiting someone here, and he was telling me that um, some members from Hugwen have come through. I don't know if I assume they haven't spoken to you, but it has come to our attention that they are expanding quite rapidly. And in your general direction, I come here today to ask you if we may enter some agreement. I'm sure being here for as long as you have, your family's been in Reed for generations, I believe.
It has, yeah, many years.
And you own quite a sizable part of the farmland here.
When you say that, she kind of like perks up a little bit. You know, for the first time you get to see like a positive emotion coming from her. She's like, second largest in all the town. Yeah, yeah.
And what great farmland it is. Now, I would hate for Hagwen to try and expand into Reed and forcibly take anything from you. They're run by a bunch of criminals, if you didn't know.
I've heard many rumors of Hodgwen. I myself have done a couple trips down that way, trade and the like. They are unique.
Criminals, yes.
She when you say that, it's you can see that she almost like wants to nod in agreement, but chooses to be diplomatic instead.
Now, we are a new nation, a new city, but we don't like the idea of a fellow neighboring state being bullied by someone a lot larger. So I just came to introduce myself and to put to you that Hargwen is coming. And at some point you will have to deal with them. And I am here to offer the services and aid of Cursefall. I quite like Reed, as I said before. And I would hate to see anything happen to the city. Or the town, sorry.
You can see as you're saying this stuff, she starts to like sit up and try to straighten her back, almost like she's trying to look more official or something like that. Again, nobody's really held an office like this pretty much ever for any extended period of time in Rid. So it's not that this person's like an incompetent person. It's just that there's never been an example for her to kind of like follow the lead of in the past. And so there was really no training for the position that she's currently in. Right? So then when she finally sees like you're kind of now talking about like a diplomatic, you're not just like a diplomat from another nation. You're literally talking about diplomatic dealings. Like I said, she straightens her back and starts to like kind of, you know, look a bit more proper, more into her seat, her position, I should say, as opposed to like chair. And she says, "Oh, so then an alliance of sorts. Very well, I can appreciate that. That is wonderful. I don't know if you've noticed, but Rid doesn't exactly have much by way of armed, guard. We have a few people that patrol fairly consistently, but beyond that, it's more a militia. When we've had problems with, say, goblins in the past, and there was that one time that, anyways, we've always kind of called to arms a militia, and they've come forward and fought, and some of them have been trained because they settled here from whatever their past was, and whatever the training was, we never really asked, and others, maybe just their father or grandmother or whoever it was had fought a war before taught them the way around the blade. And even more, others with literally no skill, just a stout heart. I see that when you approached my home, sitting out there now, looking towards the door, you have probably more fully trained, armed, and armored people than we have in our entire town that just accompanied you. So your aid, your offer is certainly one that I will not scoff at and genuinely appreciate. However, what could we possibly offer you in return?
I would like to open up trade between our towns, or my city, to begin with. Things like food from Reed would be greatly appreciated. So, in regards to what you can offer at this time, just to be a friendly neighbor, to open formal diplomatic ties, and set up a trade between our two cities, towns.
So just to allow our merchants to interact, I imagine they have at this point, but you mean to kind of coax them to doing so more for the benefit of, I imagine, commerce?
Yes, and I believe you send food and trade with Hogwen.
I do trade with Hodgwen, yes. As well as other nearby towns.
Yes, maybe reroute some of that trade from Hogwen to Kurzful.
Finally, she understands what you were kind of like working your way towards the whole while. The open up trade, offered you protection, so on and so forth. But a nice way of saying, fuck them. You know what I mean? Do me a favor, roll me a diplomacy check as you deliver this. And he rolls like Jake or Tesh or anybody that isn't Neil. Ooh! Hello. That was sexy.
Give it the luck. Give it the luck. Oh, yeah, the one. Of course.
Of course, right?
These luck dice are weighted.
You actually have one more in there than that says. It's just an increment it yet. Cool. All right, so that is a really, really, really good roll. I'm going to leave that. I'm sorry, I'm going to love that roll. So with your 22 total, she nods, understanding, and says, "Very well. I will go so far as to coax trade less so from Hodgwen and more so with Kurzfall, but if I may, because you're offering more than what I think I can even hope to return in just the trade of this small town, I'll even try to speak with the other towns that I personally have ties with and see if I can coax them into doing a bit more trade with your town."
That would be great. What towns do you speak of?
Well, there are a couple of smaller ones nearby. Some of them, honestly, don't really even have names to them. One second. So some of them don't even really have names to them. Others, it's there's a Plainville. It's a very small town. Maybe a town's probably not even the right name for it. Oh, there's actually one that I've never visited myself, but they actually send their people here to trade from a town by the name of Vigil. Very, very nice traders come from Vigil. They tend to bring decent goods with them. Honestly, actually, they have their own guards that come with their caravan as well. So I imagine they have some amount of trained persons down there. I could speak to them as well, see if they can kind of route their trade your way too.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Of course. Any other matters that you wanted to discuss?
If you hear anything on the movings of Hogwen, would you please send notice to us? We are trying our best, but you are slightly closer than we are, so you might hear things before we do.
She nods. She thinks for a few moments. And then kind of like seems to like has an idea, almost like an epiphany kind of look in her face. And she looks at you and says, you know, I could try to maintain personal trade with Hod Gwen while trying to coax the others to stop. Of course, I trust my hands and my family more than others. I could entrust into them the responsibility of procuring information while in Hod Gwen. She seems to like play with the sound in her mouth before she says it, and then says, "Spies, if you will."
One kind of has like this little smirk, and he says, "You know what, Tully? I think that's a great idea."
And she gets a smirk, like, oh, I did good. You know what I mean? And she seems a bit more bolstered by the fact that her first ever diplomatic meeting in her first ever position that she's never really ever seen filled and had no training on is going swimmingly. Everything is going extremely well. And so she actually will kind of break up into a bit of an awkward small talk from here, just because the two of you come from very different paths of life and have very different expectations or plans of the future. You guys couldn't be any more awkward. So it's almost like you're hanging out with your cousin's friends that you never really liked, but like you're being amicable. So it's like that awkward small talk conversation. You know what I mean? For a moment, and then she kind of like finishes with like, you know, a bit of another toast, like, two alliances.
He raises the probably wooden little cup or something and says, "Two alliances."
Okay. And then, you know, of course, you take your drink because you threw back a full shot this time, I imagine. You have to fight down that face one more time. But she seems to take it no problem because she grew up with this stuff.
One's a half orc. Like, really? Is it really that bad?
Well, why don't you roll me what would you do
Here we go.
A fortitude
What do you
save.
want?
A fortitude save.
Fortitude save. Okay.
I chose one that's good for you.
There you go.
He takes it fine.
Yeah.
No problems. Okay. You know what's funny is I literally set the DC to 15. I was like, I'm going to make this gross. And you actually hit that. That's a high DC for a facial expression. You know?
Yeah.
For a saving throw facial. Yeah. Anyway, so
Yeah, that is a cruel DC.
yeah, it is. So anyways, the meeting goes well and kind of adjourns with that. You guys were in there probably maybe all the small talk, everything else that's happening for maybe like an hour's time. When finally you guys come out, everybody outside kind of didn't continue working, so they're kind of just standing there on the porch because they weren't working and it is cold out. You can see everybody looks a bit cold. They've been standing in the cold for an hour, just waiting. And when she comes out, and you know the two of you have like a bit of like a happy,
Rosy
cheerful,
glow.
rosy glow and a cheerful demeanor between the two of you. And then when you leave, she kind of like straightens herself back up once again. Does like now to present her position in front of others, like trying to put that like, you know, strong foot forward, horse before the cart kind of situation. She's like, and one, chosen of the blade. It was a pleasure to meet you and to come to such wonderful terms. I look forward to future dealings with Valoran in the future. And perhaps next time you could bring the other rulers with you. I would be more than happy to host the three of you to a fine feast in my home.
He would shake her hand and
Smoked him. She's red wedding you.
and he'd be like, and we'd love to host you too. Thank you. What's her name again? Thank you, Tally. We'll be in touch.
She goes to shake your hands, but then she stops for a second as she just fumbles from that good display she just did. She doesn't know what the appropriate goodbye would be between rulers. It's kind of like she goes to shake your hand, then she stops, and then she kind of looks at her hand, and she looks at you awkwardly with her hand.
One just kind of looks at her hand and is like.
And so then she finishes and goes with a handshake and shakes your hand, and once again reaffirms kind of like that position again. And then you go walking off with your soldiers. Well, she's behind with her farm hands and uncle, you know, like, and it's kind of funny when you realize which one it was that did the like, it's that one.
As we're walking away, like well out of earshot and away from them, I just turn to one of the soldiers probably riding next to me, and I'd say, "Fucking Rayron." And he says, "I'm not," and he just looks at him, he's like, "I'm not a fucking diplomat." And shakes his head and he goes, "Let's go get drunk."
They were taken aback by your like approach at first because it was like, oh god, how angry is he? But when you finish that way, the mood kind of softens again. Everybody's talking about, and then for the first time, one of the people kind of like leans in and says, "If it's any constellation chosen, I think Valorant is a wonderful name." And then kind of the scene goes on from there, and you can see like a little bit of on his nose, and we're gonna cut back over to a break, and so we'll see everybody in just a few minutes, and see where
break
things go
train.
from there.
All aboard.
All aboard. Oh, I was recently at a diner with my daughter, and she was looking at a little picture on the wall at the diner because it was one of those like old train cars that got turned into a diner. It's New England. We have lots of that crap here. So
Kind of cute. I'm
yeah,
down.
it's cute.
We have one of them here.
Yeah, I like that kind of stuff. There's a really good bagel one in like Somerset or something like that over in like northern Rhode Island. Anyways, so
I've never seen any of that in England because all our old train carts are still in use.
it's fair. So we invented trains. You're welcome. So anyways, the even though your train system's way better than ours.
Oh god, that's
so much better. So yours is way better than ours.
Oh
ours
god, it's abysmal.
No, ours is the most atrocious. Like the United States, which is like where trains come from, have the worst train system in the world. But anyways,
It's not
my
where
apologies.
trains come from.
Yeah, we invented them. We invented everything.
We invented them.
We invented everything. So you
Oh, God.
she sent a little picture of a train, and I was like, oh my god, she's never heard Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train. And so I probably haven't listened to like maybe like 3 years or something like that. And just because it's one of those songs you forget about. And I put it on, and I forget how amazing the opening, like, it's like, wah! And it's like the guitar and the bass. I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. And like right off the bat, she's like, gives you that, like from the back seat of the car, that look like, Dad, what is this? And she's like, puts on that like, I'm rocking out face with that. This is awesome. This is, sorry. Anyways.
You're so cute.
Let's go. Break time.